I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder if it do me any good. Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just walk around my neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. Wanna be good so bad. But bad desire's all I've ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch the aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I've ever had.
All right, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out. Welcome. I'm DJ, and I am really grateful to be here, honored to be here to share my story. I'm going to try and keep it to about an hour to be respectful of everybody's time, and then we can chat afterwards. So yeah, I guess I'll launch right into it. I am feeling a little under the weather. I got my second COVID shot. I was kind of holding off on it because of how awful I felt from the first one. So I was being a bit of a baby and waiting. But a friend of mine that I know through AA was on the game show Let's Make a Deal, and he put my name down as like a recommendation. They ask you to recommend people, and they called me. And in order to potentially be on the show, you have to be vaccinated. And so I went and I bit the bullet to potentially be on this fucking game show because he won a Kawasaki motorcycle. And for the last year and a half, I've been biking around LA. I don't have a car, so I would love to get on there and win a car or a motorcycle. And they ask you about your occupation. And even though it's part-time, I do ad sales for Dopey. So I said that was my occupation. So I gave Dopey a shout out. So if I get on the show, I'm gonna represent Dopey for sure. And I also real quick wanted to acknowledge my friend Blake McCachran. Today's his birthday. It would have been his 34th birthday. He overdosed back in 2014. He did it the old-fashioned way on opiates and benzos. This was like before fentanyl was really going around. He was a great fucking dude, and died too young, like a lot of us do. And wish he was still here. I just wanted to acknowledge him. So I'll launch into it. I was born in Michigan, 1988, so I'm 33, and had a pretty seemingly normal childhood from the outside, but on the inside, behind closed doors, things were pretty fucked up and dysfunctional. My mom was and is a addict. She doesn't see herself as one, but she is. Being an addict, I can diagnose. And so she was prone to an addict with mental health problems. And then my dad drank a lot. And basically when I was 9, she told me that if she had a gun, she would kill herself because she was having marital problems with my father. And she confided in me, like she thought since I was the oldest, I could handle it. And at 9, I definitely could not handle it. And I was already at that age, I was already uncomfortable and insecure and didn't like being in my own skin. And then once I received that news, it really kind of shattered my whole matrix of being, in that it was, my security, and I didn't feel safe anymore, and I developed this sense of abandonment because I was afraid that I was going to wake up and she was going to be gone. And so my life became all about trying to please her, to make her happier so that she wouldn't be depressed and wouldn't want to kill herself. And that wasn't something that a 9-10-year-old is supposed to be doing. And as a result, it made me neurotic, and it developed this very codependent relationship between my mother and I. And so at the age of 13, I had a headache. I started to develop these headaches at that age, and they were totally it was total psychic pain. It was total emotional pain, manifested into physical pain. And she gave me Vicodin. That was my first opiate, and I loved the way that it made me feel. I forgot about the fact that she had wanted to kill herself, and I forgot that I felt insecure and felt uncomfortable, and I felt good. I felt the warmth buzz of the pill, and decided that that's how I wanted to feel forever, like I've heard a lot of people describe. And so my life then became about the pursuit of that at 13, and opiates weren't easy to obtain at that time. So I mostly stuck to drinking and smoking pot, which I started to do regularly then. At that age, it was like 8th grade. So like almost every weekend in 8th grade, it was like drinking and smoking pot whenever I could. And then once I hit high school, and then had my wisdom teeth taken out when I was 14. And that was great because I got Vicodin. And then when I was 15, I started raiding people's medicine cabinets and would get pills that way. Also in Canada, they at that time sold codeine over the counter. They called these pills 222s, and it was codeine and Tylenol, and you could acquire them without a prescription. And so my mom, being a good drug addict, would go over and get them. And so we had those in the house often. So that's how I got pills then. And then when I was 16, I got into a car accident. And it's interesting because I didn't identify it then, but I sort of see it now, especially with what I'm with what I'm interested in and sort of drawn to spiritually, in terms of like the law of attraction and energy. I manifested this car accident because it provided an opportunity to get pills. Like literally all of my being from the age of 13 to the age of 16 was about obtaining pills. I mean, for like almost wholly, it was always at the forefront of my mind. Like, yeah, I was doing other things. I was hanging out with friends. I was a big hockey player. Hockey was huge. But pills were always like, that was my top priority. And so I manifested this car accident, and I was driving, and I wasn't badly injured, but I did have pretty bad whiplash. And so after the accident, I started getting headaches, like the headaches I had, but these were worse. And so I kept getting them, and they didn't go away. And so my mom started taking me to the doctor, and they started writing me opiates. And so it started with Vicodin, and that lasted for a couple months. And what I was doing was I was exaggerating the pain. because I knew that in order to keep getting the pills, I needed to make it seem like the pain was not only continuing, but also getting worse to make it seem that like something was going on. And a friend of mine, this is so wild. A friend of mine had told me about this brain condition that he had called Chiari syndrome, which is where your brain sags down on your cerebellum sags down on your spinal cord, and it creates pressure in your head and it creates headaches. And so by this time I had just started seeing a neurologist, and I told this neurologist that I had Chiari syndrome, and he believed me because, he's like, where else would I have gotten that from other than from a doctor? And my mom, I guess, wasn't paying attention, even though she was in the room all the time. Like, I don't know where she was during all this. But she was in the room, she was there. And so they thought that I had a legitimate brain problem that was going to require surgery at some point. And so that allowed them to keep giving me heavy medication, because eventually I was going to really need it when they cut into my head, and had to, slice part of my cerebellum off or whatever the fuck they had to do. So anyways, it went from Vicodin to Percocet to Oxycontin, up to Oxycontin 20 milligram. And then for the last 3 months, I was on a fentanyl patch. I shit you not, a 25 microgram Duragesic fentanyl patch. And after I was written it for the first time, I went back to the neurologist, and he fucked up and he gave me 100 microgram. And I put it on and I almost died in my sleep. And I told a family friend, I called up a family friend who does hospice and was like, my doctor wrote too much and you need to write me, the proper amount. And she did. And so then I had the extra for myself, which I was like sucking out the liquid. And so I was on a patch and sucking the liquid. So basically I had been prescribed opiates at that point for about 8 months. And it was halfway through my senior year. And the doctors decided that I needed to be pulled off all opiates, because they had found out that I didn't have Chiari syndrome. And they're like, you can't keep, like, we don't have any more, narcotics to give you. You've reached the top, the peak, the top. Like, we got to take you off and figure out where you're at. And so it was just before Thanksgiving, my senior year, the rest of the opiates came out of my system, and I experienced withdrawal for the first time. And it was super, super fucked, because I didn't know what opiate withdrawal was. But I experienced it full on. And I just remember like crying in a fetus, like just wanting to crawl out of my skin and not knowing what was wrong with me, and crying hysterically. And I was like that for 2 days before the doctors wrote me a prescription to then wean off. But when my mom brought the prescription home, it was a prescription for 20 milligram oxycodone. I switched it with Lexapro. I had Lexapro up in the cupboard, which was an antidepressant that I had been prescribed. And so the oxycodone that I was supposed to detox on, I abused, I snorted. And so I was really fucked. So then I go back to school after Christmas break. It's like, the second half of my senior year, it's supposed to be like this great time. Everybody's like, figuring out what college they're going to, planning spring break, and I'm fucking strung out. And I'm not supposed to be, right? And so I'm in a really bad place, and I'm like doing everything I can for pills. I wound up like breaking into these like older people's house that I knew, and I was just desperate. I was totally desperate. And so I go in to follow up with my doctor. And like a month after I'd been pulled off, and as I'm leaving the office, his prescription pad is sitting there. And I just grab it. I grab it up and I stick it in my pocket, and I feel better. Like the sickness goes away for a minute. And when I get home, I look online at how to write the nomenclature of what a pharmacist writes. They write like special. I can't remember what it is now, but they write special things on the script about taking it certain times a day and things like that. I wanted to make sure that I wrote that down so that it looked official. And I had a script from that doctor for some reason, so I was able to copy his handwriting, and I wound up writing and getting filled 3 or 4 scripts for Vicodin on my own volition, and so that helped. That made me feel better. Obviously, the Vicodin got me through, but then I got fucking greedy, and Oxycontin was like my jam at that time. That's when Oxycontin was like seeing its, having its heyday. And Oxycontin 80 milligram was like the zenith of painkillers in my world. And so that's what I wrote, a prescription for that. And I wrote it with 1 refill. And now I know, and didn't know at the time, that you can't write that with a refill. And so I first went to Detroit, to this kind of, this Rite Aid in a not great area. I tried to get it filled there, and they gave it back to me and said that they didn't have it in stock. They looked at me a little bit funny. So I went to another one, and the same thing happened. And by this time I'm getting itchy, and I'm just, all I can think about is what, the feeling of what it would be like to have them in front of me. I can see them. I can taste them in my mouth, from chewing them up, the very specific taste of what an Oxycontin 80 milligram tastes like. And so I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to my pharmacy. So I go to my hometown pharmacy in Grosse Pointe, and where I've had tons of scripts filled before, so like it wasn't all that crazy because I'd had lots of scripts for opiates filled, but I hadn't in a couple months. And so and I wasn't with my mom, and so I give the prescription to the pharmacist, and he looks at it, and he looks up at me, and then he looks down at it again, and then he goes, I've known this doctor for 20 years, and I've never once seen him write this prescription. Go home to your parents. I'm calling the police. And I think I shit myself a little bit, and was just freaked the fuck out, and I think I was out of Vicodin at that point too, because of course I would be, right? And so I went home, and I think I repressed exactly what happened after that because I don't remember, but I wound up in an adolescent facility, and it fucking sucked because I feel like I was sick for 6 months. But I was in there, and it was like juvenile detention, and it was just awful. But I did 10 days in there before I was able to talk my dad into coming and picking me up. And I assured them that I wasn't going to ever do opiates again, that I had learned my lesson, and that, everything was going to be good. It was going to go back to the way that it had been before I had, gotten in trouble. And he believed me, because he wanted to believe me, and because he hated the idea of his son being in this place, which was not a very nice place. It was just the only place they they knew to put me because it was the only adolescent facility, but it was kind of rough. And, I was definitely out of place. Let's just say that. And, so he picks me up and I get home, and then the next day we go up to my cottage, like an hour away. And that night I asked my mom if I can use the car to go to an AA meeting, knowing, and so on my way to the AA meeting, I stop at the CVS and get a refill for the Vicodin, so the next night after swearing, that I wouldn't do it, of course I do it. And so I do that. And then, that was Valentine's Day. About a week and a half to 2 weeks later, I'm in school and a friend of mine is walking around. He walks around our group of friends and it's like, hey guys, I have to start baseball season. Do any of you guys want a part-time job? And I knew that he worked in a pharmacy. He worked in a privately owned pharmacy. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude, I want a job. Because at this point, and looking back, it's hard to believe that I was so fucking fucked, and like off the chain. But I know that you guys get it. But I also knew, like, I think deep down, I knew that whatever I did, my parents were going to bail me out. And I also had no concept of like that I could go to jail or prison. Like that wasn't in my reality. I just didn't, just wasn't in my reality. It couldn't happen to me. It just couldn't. And so I didn't consider it. And so when I was thinking like, okay, I want to get into the pharmacy, but I also wasn't planning on necessarily like doing exactly what I did. It was more like it was supposed to be more subtle than it was. But what wound up happening was, I get in there and I didn't tell this story on Dopey, but the first day that I started, the pharmacist is showing me around, and we're back in the pharmacy, and up on the ledge, like by the front window, there's this red pill sitting there. And this red pill had probably been sitting there for 5 years, right? Like, and looking back on it now, they probably did it as a test. But this red pill is sitting there, and I'm like certain that it's a painkiller for no reason. Like, I don't know that I'd ever even seen a red painkiller, but I'm certain that it's an opiate. And so I'm walking behind them and I reach over and fucking grab it. And not only like take it, but I chew it. And and a half hour later, I'm like falling over. And I would later realize that it was Seroquel. And I would learn that because later on in rehab, I would chew my night med. And I was like, oh, that's what that was. So it was Seroquel. So it must have not been a test because they didn't fire me after the first day, but I don't know how they didn't notice. It was like a bunch of old ladies. It was like this old school, like it's owned by this older family and whatever. So that was my first day. On my fourth day, I had scoped the place out and I told the story in Dopey, but I'm stocking empty pill bottles behind the pharmacy, and so I have this giant box full of empty pill bottles. And at the time, there was only one pharmacist back there, and the pharmacy was set up like a square, and you could walk on every side of it, and there were shelves on the wall of the square. And so this tub of Vicodin was up against the wall on the very top shelf. And I mean, I could barely reach it. And when I cut around the corner and the pharmacist was like safely behind it, I quickly reached up and I grabbed it and I pulled it down, and I did so like really smoothly so as not to like make a jumbling sound of the pills moving. and I put it into the box real quick. And then I like went right back to stocking the empty pill bottles, and I like acted like everything was calm. And it like took everything inside of me not to be like jumping for joy and like losing it that I had these pills in my possession. But I made it back to the back area where my backpack was, and emptied all the pills in my backpack, and frickin' then got rid of the tub, and went home and went to town. And then a couple days later, on my birthday, I'm walking out of school, and my mom comes in, and she's found the pills, and I ended up going to treatment that night, and it's my first time in treatment, and there wound up being another like 13 times in treatment. But I'm gonna start speeding through a little bit because I'm going way too slow. 'Cause it's already 7:33. Holy shit. But yeah, this is just like sort of the start. And this is just kind of like a sign of the sort of the type of drug addict that I was. Oh, I appreciate that, you guys. We're here for the long haul. So, I'll try and speed up a little bit more, but I'll keep going. All right, for sure. Appreciate it, guys. So yeah, so I go to treatment, and I learn about what AA is, and like decide that it's I decide I make certain judgments about it, like that at that time, that it's not for me, and that it is something that I'll probably do later on in life, but it requires a lot of work. And so, yeah, so I sort of conceptualized AA at that point. And I also learned about other drugs while I was in there too, which is something that like I've heard other people talk about. Like they go to rehab and they find other drug connections, or they learn about other drugs. That's like one of the downsides, one of the ways that it backfires, one of the way the treatment backfires. And so I learned all about heroin. There was this kid who was from my hometown, who was a couple years older, who I thought was like super fucking cool, who was on heroin. And the way he talked about it, because of course all we did was sit there and like smoke cigarettes and glamorize our drug use. Like that's all we did. Like I had zero intention of getting or staying sober, even though I was a little bit freaked out about what had happened because of how freaked my parents were. And I did have some realization that like I had committed 2 major felonies in the course of a month. And with the Vicodin, had my mom not searched my room that day and found the pills and came into school and caught me when she did, like I was literally leaving school to go to work. The police were going to be there, and I would have wound up in prison because I was 18. Now, whether I would have or not, who knows? It would have been my first offense. I just turned 18. Maybe they would have let me go to treatment, but I could have very well wound up going to prison. And I don't know how they do it. I mean, if they charge a felony for each pill, it could have been 1,000 felonies. But I don't think they do that. It actually would have been like 950 felonies because I think I had taken like 50 of them. So yeah, so the gravity of the situation was with me a little bit, but it wore off quickly when I got around these other people and we're talking about drugs. Because I was just in it, I was straight fucking addicted. And so I go through treatment, learn about heroin, kind of put that in my back pocket as something that I'll probably revisit. Get out and I do outpatient. I think I stayed clean for like 4 months. And then Fuck. And then I was supposed to go to Michigan State University for school, but I had failed to, actually my parents had fucked up. They didn't send in a deposit on time, and so I got put on the wait list. And so I decided to go to a community college nearby the university. And while I was doing that, I was going to live with my uncle, my dad's brother. And so I did that. And at that time, I was actually spending a lot of time with my buddy, Blake McCackern, who I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. And I was trying to act like a normal college kid. I was trying to just drink and smoke pot and party and, you know, be into hooking up and all that stuff. And I was able to a little bit, but pretty quickly I started making trips back to Detroit from East Lansing, which was like, I don't know, it was like an hour and a half. And these trips became more regular. And I wound up selling my books back for money to buy oxys. And then I started stealing books from the library and selling them back. And pretty quickly got a habit. So I'm back for Halloween of that year. And I go to meet my dealer and I get like 10 pills and they're a little bit different than usual. And he tells me they're generic, and I had a cell phone and I could have looked him up, but I didn't for some reason because I trusted him. And I took a couple and nothing happened. And so I took a couple more and nothing fucking happened. And of course, like, instead of realizing like, okay, these pills aren't what they're supposed to be, I just keep taking them. And so at the end of a couple hours, I've taken all 10 of them. There may have been more than that. But I've taken a number of these pills, and I very vaguely remember starting to hallucinate and just acting crazy. And at some point, I called my girlfriend at the time. She came over to my parents' house. Long story short, I end up in the hospital. I end up in a 3-day coma. What I had taken was an amitriptyline antidepressant, which because of the amount that I took, had an effect on my nervous system in a way that, like, they had to induce a coma on me or else I was going to potentially suffer brain damage. And they told my parents while I was in the coma that if I were to wake up, if I woke up, that I would most definitely have brain damage, and to be prepared for that. And so, of course, they're fucking, devastated. And I wind up waking up after 3 days. And what's wild is that my uncle Joe, died of an overdose almost to the minute that I woke up from the coma. And so, I don't know, I've been kind of exploring that sort of stuff, the afterlife and spirits, those sorts of things, a little bit, because I think it's interesting. But I definitely think that there was some, I don't know. It's just interesting. I think it's more than coincidence that I sort of lived and he didn't. I don't know. But so I wake up and fucking my parents are freaked out. I go to the psych ward for 4 days, and then they're like, we got to do something. And so they decide to send me to Washington State for long-term treatment. And this was like cushy treatment. This wasn't like it was like wilderness focused, but it wasn't like you're out in the forest for 6 months. It was like was called Gray Wolf Ranch. And like you're at this ranch and then you go out on excursions for 10 days at a time. And I had a great experience. And I was there for 3 months. And then I did 3 months in a sober living. So I was sober for 6 months. And I kind of started to like myself sober a little bit, but I didn't deal with, I still struggled to deal with my emotions and depression. At this time I was on antidepressants, and I've been on antidepressants forever. I definitely think that, well, no, I can't say that. Yeah, I struggled sober. I struggled. And so I looked for some help with that. And so I started smoking weed, and I was okay for a little bit, and what the fuck ended up happening? I think what happened was I had this community that I was connected to, and because they were all sober and in AA, when I started smoking weed, I got disconnected from them. And I think that happens sometimes, or a lot of times, with AA and recovery in general and NA. Like when somebody like relapses or decides that they want to introduce weed or whatever it is back into their life, like they can be ostracized from the community. And I think it's really harmful. And I experienced it. And so if anyone wants to do that, I always try and be open. And that's one of the things I love about the Dopey Nation is that we're pretty open about that. I know that there's been some controversy recently, but I think, total abstinence is the way that I've chosen to go, because doing other stuff just hasn't worked. But it doesn't mean it maybe someday can't, but right now I'm just not willing to explore it just because I don't want to risk it. And things are good the way they are, for the most part. But then I couldn't handle it. And but I started smoking weed, I got disconnected, and then I got connected, so I got disconnected from the good crowd, got connected to the bad crowd. So there was like this group of guys that had all started using again, and they got this house in town. It was just this small town, and everybody in the house was using, and that's where I started using opiates again. And that was the first place I shot heroin. I didn't shoot heroin, I shot Dilaudid. Somebody shot me up with Dilaudid. That was the first time I shot up anything, got shot up. And it was like fucking, like nothing else in terms of feelings, and like nothing I had experienced. And I was super, super fucking hooked, and immediately did another shot, and immediately had the person teach me how to do it because I needed to know how to do it. And so used for a couple months, wound up bottoming out, got to a place where I lost my job out there. And I basically turned a really great situation where I had this cool job actually working for this recovery clothing brand called Bad Habit. I was a screen printer. So I ran this 13 plate press, printing t-shirts, and I really dug the job. And I lost it because I couldn't show up on time for work. And so I couldn't support myself anymore. And I had to move back home to Michigan. And, it was pretty apparent that I was strung out. My parents I don't think wanted to acknowledge it, but I think deep down they knew that I was, which had to have been just such a fucking bummer and really frustrating for them, because this rehab was not cheap. It was like $10K a month, and it really hurt my family financially. And it's something that I struggle with because years later, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but years later, my dad committed suicide. And part of the reason why is because financially things were so fucked. And he was a stockbroker. And in 2008, 2009, the stock market crashed. And then he's paying for me 10K a month at this treatment center in 2008 when shit is hitting the fan. And I go and I'm getting high. So, yeah, I struggle with that because I feel guilty. I feel partly responsible. And I know that I am. I mean, I played a part in the situation. It doesn't mean it's my fault, but I played a part. And that's part of what motivates me to live differently. And so I get home and, and I immediately find somebody, an old high school friend who's doing heroin, and we start doing it together. And I start dating this girl who was my sister's age. My sister was 2 years younger, and she happened to have a famous mother who is this spiritual writer. She actually she ran for president last presidential run. Her name's Marianne Williamson. I'll just say who she is. I don't know if you guys have heard of her or not. She's a spiritual writer. So I was dating her daughter, and she was in the process of moving from Grosse Pointe to Los Angeles and needed some help. And so, and Emma, her daughter, was starting school in London. And so I wound up getting a key to their fucking mansion in Grosse Pointe with all of their valuable shit in the house, like crazy stuff, and like stuff that they wouldn't notice was gone. And I didn't feel bad about pawning, stuff I feel bad about now and I've had to make amends for. But like random coin collections and like so much jewelry that it was like silly, and like first editions of books and fucking what's it called? Dishware, like silver dishware, and just so much shit. I mean, and I had their whole house to get high in. And so I did, I did. And that was like, yeah, I could have opened a fucking pawn shop for real. But eventually everything had to be moved. And so like that gravy train ended. And it ended with me actually going out to Europe. Her mom flew me out on her frequent flyer miles to London, and I stayed with Emma for a week, and I was so fucking sick because I had come off this like massive habit of pawn jewelry, and her mom had a massive stash of benzos too that I had gotten into. So I was in rough shape, and I was like, let's go do this, let's go do that. And I'm just immobilized, trying to pretend like nothing's wrong. And I'm like, I got the flu. And it was like in her dorm building. And it was just like, yeah, this tiny room. It was fucking awful. But, I got through it, and they also sell codeine there without a prescription. I found that alleviated my pain a little bit. And so then I had saved some money somehow. Well, not somehow. I'd saved some money pawning their shit, and went on a solo trip. I flew to Poland, and spent like 5 days in Poland. I went to fucking Auschwitz, which was wild. I toured Auschwitz on their Halloween, which is Day of the Dead over there, and it was the most eerie fucking wild thing ever. So it was pretty crazy. And then I went all over the place. I went to Amsterdam, of course, for like 10 days and just went buck wild and spent all my money there. That was the last place that I went. But went to Germany, went to Spain, all over the place. Yeah, I saved a bunch of the money from that I pawned their shit, and I was working a little bit too. But and I didn't plan any of it either. I just sort of like went. I just booked the flight to Poland, and then I just kind of went where I went. And I was such an asshole about it. I didn't like stay in touch with Emma at all the whole time. And at one point, I talked to Emma, and she's like, you're such a fucking dick. She's like, my mom booked us a hotel room at this fancy hotel in Paris last week. If you would have just like been in touch with me, you know, we would have had the weekend in Paris, but you're too busy like doing what you're doing. And of course I was cheating on her and just like going to these like weird raves in frickin' in Germany and in Madrid, these crazy parties. So I kept my shit together because I was like only drinking and doing ecstasy and mushrooms and stuff. So that was wild. I didn't talk to my parents the whole time I was there. So when my dad picked me up from the airport, he's like, he was not happy because I was still living with them at this time. And so he's like, you're gonna go back to school and you're gonna work, or you're not gonna live in the house. And so I'm like, okay. And basically I didn't last long. I went back to school and I was taking books from the library and selling them back. But then I got caught doing that. Well, I didn't get caught, but they caught on to me doing that. So one day I'm in the library and I'm sick and fucking this. So I'm scouring the library for books to steal. And this woman is sitting there with a stack of books, and she gets up to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. And I just like kind of smoothly walk over there and I grab up the books and I just go straight to the bookstore and I sell back her books. And then I go cop and then actually show up to class later that day. And then I'm in English class and I'm sitting there and of course 2 police show up and I'm such a dumbass and I'm so blown out. I'm like, damn, it sucks for whoever this person is that they're coming to get. Like, it didn't even occur to me that it was me. And they're like, you know, Mr. Donald Rentz. and I'm like, fuck. And so they call me up and I go and talk to them and they're like, you know, we noticed that you sold these books back for classes that you're not taking. You know, what's going on with that? And I'm like, you know, I tried to make up some bullshit and they're like, listen, you know, we know you sold these books, just, you know, come up with the money. And so I told them that I would go to treatment and the woman agreed not to press charges. So again, this was the third time in like 3-4 years that I went to treatment to avoid charges. And I was still like, I think I was under 22. So I go to treatment and I get on Suboxone. I move out to Ann Arbor, which is where the University of Michigan is. And I start doing AA out there and I start working in restaurants and, you know, do okay for a little bit. And then, you know, shit inevitably gets bad again. I go back to using dope. Like it always happens. And at one point, I'm strung out and I'm getting ready to go to to detox. And so what I would do oftentimes before I went to detox was rip off my drug dealers so that when I got out of detox, I couldn't call them anymore. You know, it was a method of self-perseverance. And so I call up my dealer, and my plan was for him to come and me to get in the car and him to hand me the drugs and for me to get out and run away, and that to be the end of it. And it seemed like a, you know, pretty simple plan. And I had kind of scouted the area out a little bit. There were train tracks in front of the parking lot where he was going to meet me. And the only thing that I thought of was just don't go on the train tracks, because that's going to be bad, because they'll then be nowhere to hide, like run the opposite direction as the train tracks. I had planned poorly because I had slept in the University of Michigan Graduate Library the night before, which is where I had slept the last couple of weeks because I'd been kicked out of transitional housing and was homeless. And so I had stolen some books from the library, like 10 books, and about half of them were hardcover. So the backpack I was wearing was like super heavy. And so I had that happening too. And I had some clothes in there too. And so he, you know, I call him, he shows up, and I'm pretty sick at this point. You know, and so he pulls up, and I get into his car, and yeah, he fucking, we're talking, we're small talking for a minute, and he hands me the drugs, and we like keep talking, and I like can remember it now because I'm just like, I'm hesitant to do what I'm about to do, because I'm like, this is, you know, because I had ripped him off once before, and then gone back to him because his shit was so good. And when I had gone back to him, he slapped the shit out of me. And he's like, if you ever do this again, I'm going to fucking kill you. And he was this big black dude. Like he was like, not saying that race has anything to do with it, but he was just a big dude, and he was scary. Like he was from the street, and he told me he was going to kill me if I did it again. And I was getting ready to do it again. And, but I was sick, and I felt invincible. You know, I felt invincible for a long time, up until like recently. And, so I opened the door and I booked it. And of course, instead of like running the other way, like I planned, I ran towards the train tracks. And like, when I realized what I'd done, I turned back, and he's fucking out of the car. And so I turn back and I run to the train tracks, and I get on the train tracks thinking he won't come after me on the train tracks, but he does. And so I'm running and running and running, and fucking out of breath and so out of shape. And he doesn't catch up with me, but like almost does. And then I get off the train tracks, and I'm like knocking on people's windows of their car, telling them that someone's after me and asking them to let me in their car. And nobody lets me in. I did it to like 3 different cars, and I'm sure that he's going to catch me and kill me. And I'm so terrified. And I make it into somebody's backyard, and I get back there, and I have my kit with me, and some water and some lemon juice, and I mix up a shot of heroin and crack, and shoot it up. And I'm like still out of breath at this point. And so I almost kill myself with the crack. Like my heart almost explodes. And my heartbeat is off for like 2 days. I set it into arrhythmia for like 2 days, which I had done a couple times. And I sit there and wait until it's dark, and then leave, and then end up in detox later or I think the next morning. And yeah, that was, you know, totally fucked. And yeah, like that's the type of shit that I would do. And I'm glad that I'm not doing anymore. And that was like, I was like 23 at that time, and I'm 33 now, and I just stopped using a year and a half ago. Like there was like 10 more years of that. Like I don't know how, like my ability to withstand pain is just, or I don't think it's that. I think it's just the addiction is so strong, and I've just survived somehow fucking survived. So after that happened, I end up as an accidental Scientologist. After this happened, I called my mom's insurance, because I'm still under insurance. And they tell me I can go to 2 different treatment centers, one which I had been to before, and the other one is a 3-month-long treatment center, but I don't know anything about it. And so I called the dude on the phone to find out about it, and he's like talking it up. He's like, yeah, we're not 12-step based. It's something new. We've got all these different modalities. Like he's saying anything under the sun just to make this sound like the best program ever. He's like, I went through it. It's turned my life around, and he was like a younger guy. And so he sold the shit out of it. And his name was Don. And so I took that as like a sign that I was meant to go there. And so, and he's like, and we could come and pick you up. And so it was in Albion, Michigan. And so they come and pick me up like a couple of weeks later. And fucking, I get there, and I learned that it's not a medical detox, which thankfully I brought Suboxone with me, which is something I did for most rehabs and detoxes, just because most detoxes anyways, because I never knew, was always like freaked out. And so I snuck Suboxone in, which was lucky, because what they were giving people to detox was large doses of magnesium. Just large doses of magnesium. And so I got through the detox, and this place is strange, like there's 140 students, they call us. And like it's like school. Like it's not very like therapeutic. And yeah, it was extremely dangerous. And they shut a number of these places down. It was called Narconon. They shut at least one of them down in Oklahoma because somebody died in their sauna program. But yeah, they would have us do the craziest fucking shit. They were called TRs, training routines. And one of them was you would sit 3 feet apart from each other, sitting on a chair with your feet on the ground, staring at each other for 2 hours with no facial movement or expression. It was called confront. So the idea was that you were confronting the other person. And then, so that was one of them, and you had to pass it. You had to do it until you could pass it. And then there was another one where you would do that, but the other person would try and make you laugh or try and make you mad. They would try and make you have any sort of expression, and you had to sit there and be stonewalled and show no expression. And you had to do it for, that one was only an hour, but it was fucking difficult. It was like making you, it's like diminishing your response to stimuli, which is sort of what Dianetics is about, which is what they do in Scientology, which they have you repeat experiences over and over again in an attempt to reduce your emotional reaction to it. And they hook you up to this meter. I forget what it's called, but this meter that the cans, yes, very good. The cans that like detect your energy or your emotional reaction. And it's about like diminishing it and getting it down and eventually getting you clear is the goal. But that costs like $10 million to do. And it's really all about the money. And I actually watched this fucking thing on the Illuminati today because I'm weird and like obsessed with conspiracy theories and the New World Order and all this stuff. And apparently L. Ron Hubbard was known as was in like different satanic rituals and created Scientology for the money. You know, like he was quoted as saying to Aldous Huxley that like religion was the best way to make money. And so I didn't know that at the time. And I literally, so despite all this weird shit that they had us do, and there was even weirder shit to do where you had what was called a twin, and you had to run the twin through different exercises. And it was the most mundane thing over and over again. Like you would walk across the room and say, see that object? And they would acknowledge yes. You'd say, pick up that object. They would acknowledge yes. And then you would just do it over and over and over again for hours and hours and hours and hours. And despite all that, I was like, okay, Scientology is like, there's a secret here. There's something going on. Because there were guys on staff that were like talking about Dianetics and making it sound like it was this really mysterious thing. And I was gullible, you know, and I just like wanted to not be strung out on heroin. So I was like, you know, I was open to it. And luckily I spent 6 months there, 6 fucking months. Now it wasn't all crazy, shitty hell. We played volleyball every day. They had a sand volleyball court, which is fucking sick. And like, I was hooking up with this girl while I was there. Like that was a thing. There was 140 of us, guys and girls. Everybody was coupled up. It was like a summer camp with like the weirdest shit ever every day. So it was there for 6 months. Then I started working there and I wound up getting fired because while you're in withdrawals, the staff would give you massages for withdrawal symptoms. And I gave an inappropriate massage to a girl, this other girl that I was hooking up with when I first got there. You know, I gave her an inappropriate massage, and you know, she was cool with it. I mean, she, you know, was into it, but they caught me on camera and they fired me. And it wound up being the best thing that could have happened, because if not, I may be a Scientologist today. But I hate when that happens, when they catch you on camera being a creep. I wasn't being a creep, I swear to God. But so while I was there, I met this guy named Gary, who was like a mentor. He was like a spiritual sage, and fucking myself and these 2 others would like sit down on the ground while he would like sit there and fucking spout off about spiritual matters. And he had read all these books, and I just thought he was fucking awesome. And he lived in New York City, and you know, he had some success. He was just the best. He had told me while we were in Narconon that I should move to New York City, and he gave me his information. And he's like, if you're ever interested in moving out to New York City, he's like, you can live with me and I'll get you started. And fucking, you know, it'll be great. And you should really do it. Because I was 25, and he's like, there's nothing for you in Michigan. He's like, if you stay here, you're just going to get out and you're going to fuck up again, and you're probably going to die. And there were people dying like every day. Like people were getting out of Narconon and dying left and right, because there was 140 of us. So we would hear about somebody constantly fucking dying. So I called him because I had gotten out of Narconon and naturally had started shooting dope again and had gotten a habit. And he's like, yeah, come out here and live with me. And so, and I'm getting there, you guys. I'm going to go like another 15, 20 minutes. So he gets me a bus ticket, and I head out, and my parents are like so disgusted with me at this point. that because they had come and seen my thanks Chelsea and thanks Chris. They had seen my like graduation speech from Narconon, and they were so like weirded out, and they were like, "What is going like the?" I think they just couldn't believe like what had become of my life, that I had fallen so far. Although I had never been very high to begin with, I'd been on drugs forever. So they give me $100 and they're like, good luck, hopefully you do better out there than you did here. And of course, well, not of course, but on the trip, I spent the $100 on heroin in Chicago. And so by the time I get to New York, I have $0. And Gary was in touch with my dad, and Gary asked him about if he had sent any money. My dad said yes. So Gary knew that I had used on the way. And Gary was clean at this point, but they said at Narconon that if alcohol wasn't your drug of choice, that you could drink. So Gary was drinking, but he wasn't doing opiates, which were his drug of choice. But I guess I had a bad enough habit to the first night that I was there. We had to stay in a hotel room the first night because his apartment was getting painted or something like that. And apparently I was like flopping around because I was sick. And so basically me living with him started on a really bad note because he knew that I was using and lying to him. And which is really shitty because he was really doing something pretty incredible by letting me live with him. And I was just fucking shitting all over it, totally. And I couldn't see that, it didn't occur to me. And so his reaction to that was like, he asked me if I needed or if I wanted an iPhone. And I said, yes. So he got me an iPhone on his plan, which I later found out was to track me, which is also weird. And I will mention right now that Gary was gay. So that's a dynamic of this as well. He was an older gay man, but there was never, we were always like friendly and goofing around. Like I never felt that from him. I would like shortly thereafter find out that there was that there a little bit, to some extent. But so he was tracking me. I was lying to him because instead of looking for work, like I told him, I was like going up to Harlem and looking for drugs. And I got ripped off a couple times. Copping in New York was like not easy like I thought it would be. But yeah, it was not easy. It was pretty fucked. But I pretty quickly got a job waiting tables because I had done that before and was making pretty good money pretty quick. So I was able to go out and I could get ripped off and still do what I needed to do. And I got to a point where my dealer was meeting me at the restaurant I was working at. And this was very quickly. This was after like 2 months. But Gary was tracking me. And so one day after like 2 months, I'm up in Harlem meeting him, and Gary has the police somehow fucking get this guy somehow, some way. He'd been doing some deep like undercover shit or who knows. But so my connect is caught up, and I'm in trouble. And so while this was going on, so also at that time, I had changed my name from DJ to Don because I thought that would somehow keep me not fucked up or change something. So that's when I started going by Don. And we were out at a bar one night, Gary and I kept like checking this girl out and not having the balls to go up and talk to her. So finally she came and talked to me, and we hit it off. And And so within like a month and a half, I am moving in with her. And Gary like freaked out and at one point was chasing me through New York City, was literally chasing me down because he was so opposed to me moving in with her because he felt that because he knew I was getting high and he knew that I was lying to her and he like couldn't take it. And then he told her flat out that I was lying and I admitted it and she still was okay with being with me and letting me live with her, which was like insane. I didn't understand it, but she had like her own motives. She was 10 years older and I think she felt like she could like mold me and kind of make me whatever she wanted. And also I was younger and she had this like group of like really flamboyant gay men that she hung out with. And I think she felt like she could like show me off. Yeah, it was like control for sure. Um, yeah, so despite all that, she was letting me live with her. Um, but I still was like lying to her compulsively because I was still using. And then one morning, shortly after I'm living with her, I had decided that I was going to get on methadone. And I had always heard terrible things about methadone, but of course, like I thought I was the exception. I thought that I was going to be the one that could like get on and off of it, no problem. I was just going to go on it for a very short time. You know what I mean? And I chose that and not Suboxone because I'd been on Suboxone before. I chose methadone because I knew that you could kind of get high off of it if you had a high enough dose. And I wanted to be high, and so I left like really early in the morning, and had been like flopping around in the bed next to her the night before. And this was actually before she knew what was going on. So before I had told her my whole history, I'm withdrawing in bed next to her, and I leave at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I get back like 6 hours later because I had to go to Soho from Chelsea. Actually, right where Dave's dad lives is where I was living, like right next to his dad lives at, I think, 29th and 8th. I was at 28th and 7th. So I was like right there. And Gary lived at 28th and 6th. So right in that area of Chelsea. It's a great area. And so I come back like 6 hours later and she's like, where have you been? What have you been doing? And I told her that I had gone to the gym and fallen asleep in a massage chair, which I thought was a good excuse, but she didn't buy it for like a second. And that's when it all came out. And I was like, listen, I just got on methadone. I'm a terrible drug addict. Like I've been a drug addict forever. You are making a mistake by getting together with me. I am going to hurt you. Run for the hills. Like I said all that to her face, meant it sincerely. And it drove her closer to me. It was the weirdest thing. So we like we coupled up and started playing house together, and things were really good for like I don't know, about a year. She liked to drink a lot, and obviously that was cool with me. So we were going out all the time and drinking heavily, and she helped me get a job at Nobu through her friend. And Nobu is a high-end Japanese restaurant, a lot of celebrities. I'm just going to tell this one story, and I'm going to keep moving it along. So I'm working at Nobu, and I, at this time, was on 120 milligrams of methadone, 70 milligrams of Vyvanse, which is like Adderall if you're not familiar, and prescribed 2 milligrams of Xanax a day. And this, I don't know how I was getting prescribed this. And it is fucking Kim Kardashian's birthday. And so she has rented out the back room with, and it's her and Kanye West and Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke and the chick from the Blurred Lines video. It was the summer of Blurred Lines, that song that was playing everywhere. And then like their crew and all their guys. So it was a tables pushed together. It was like I don't know, like 14 people or something like that. And so I'm my like normal fucked up self, and it's like their meal is over with, and they're having a good time. They're drinking sake, you know. We've cleared the table, and for some reason I got chosen to drop the cake, and they've brought in this like, you know, this bakery cake that was, you know, made from the outside, this really nice cake, probably cost like $600. And it's got custom candles on it. And I'm like, I go around the back of the table so that she doesn't see me. And I'm waiting for like the right time, because she's like talking and being really animated. And so I'm waiting for her to like kind of chill before I'm gonna like light the candles and drop the cake. And so I'm like kind of hesitating. So bring the cake down, and I light the lighter to light the birthday cake. And when I do, the flame goes whoosh, like not like whoosh, whoosh, but like it whooshed out a bit, and it stunk like burnt hair, like the whole back room, like immediately. So I light the candles and I drop the cake, and I like hightail it back into the kitchen. And I'm like freaked out, but I'm also like laughing hysterically, because I'm realizing like what just happened, and like the gravity of what just happened. And my the other server that was working the table with me is freaking out, because he's like, we're gonna get fired. And I'm like, no, like like if anybody's gets fired, it's gonna be me. You're gonna be fine. And I figured it was gonna be all right, because after all, it was her fault for having so much product in her hair. And so so we're like waiting in the kitchen, afraid to go back out. And then when I do finally walk back out, Kim Kardashian is like walked all the way down the front of the restaurant where the stairs are to go down to the exit of the restaurant, to the street. And Kanye is like not running, but he's like quickly going after her, as if to console her. So it's my assumption that she like went out crying. So I think, and I hope that I don't hope, but I think that I made Kim Kardashian cry inadvertently and melted some of her hair. So I didn't get fired for that. It didn't get mentioned, actually. And what was funny was that like the table, it was her birthday. Yeah, it was her own birthday. And like it could have been totally separate. Like it could have been her and Kanye fighting for all we know, you know, like for all I know, that made her upset. And but it seemed likely that it was probably the burnt hair and her being embarrassed. But back at the table, everybody that was left there was having a good old time. Like they were still drinking, and they wound up staying until the restaurant closed, like a couple hours later. And Robin Thicke was like wasted. He was like tumbling down the stairs of the restaurant afterwards. And I think, yeah. So that was cool. But I really enjoyed working there. And, but I fucked it up, man. I fucked it up. His lines got blurred. Shit. Yeah. And I had some other funny celebrity stories too, but I'm not going to share them right now. But I wound up getting fired. Well, I got let go because, because what I was doing was I was stealing. All the cash tips went to the bar. I was pocketing cash tips and turning in less than what I was actually getting because we pooled tips. So I was stealing from my team, my coworkers, like real piece of shit, and I was stealing from guests as well. Um, by um, by when they paid cash, I would go to managers and say they didn't like this item, they need it taken off. And because dishes were like $50, if they took one dish off, that extra $50 I would be able to put in my pocket. So I was doing that more than pocketing tips because the other way was more noticeable, and I didn't like taking from my coworkers. I liked more just taking from the customers directly. And this was not the first time that I would steal from a restaurant like this. I got in a lot of trouble in Ann Arbor. I did this 2 different times in Ann Arbor and got fired for it and forced to go to treatment. One time I was writing in extra tips on guest checks. And yeah, and so and then I was eating food off customers' plates, which sounds gross, but it was off like untouched stuff. So like they'd order big like fucking like Wall Streeters would come in and order that's a Dave move. They would order like a big old plate of sushi, and it'd be a company card or whatever. And they'd hardly eat any of it. And so there'd be all this food that was still really good. And I didn't want it to go to waste, and I'd be fucking starving. And thank you. I'm glad that people can relate. And so they had warned us a couple times. They're like, don't eat off people's food, off plates. Don't eat off their plates. And they had a camera back in the dish pit. And so I just like kept doing it because I couldn't resist because I'm such a drug addict. And so it was a combination of one night where I had added dishes to a guest table so that they would pay extra so that I could then take them off because managers were no longer taking stuff off of guest checks because I was asking them to do it so much. So I had to change my method a little bit. And the guests noticed and they're like, this is ridiculous. There's like 3 extra items on here. We're friends with Robert De Niro, who was part owner of the restaurant. What's your name? And I had to tell him my name because my name was on the check. And so I think it got back to him, maybe. So that was part of it. Plus it coincided with me eating food for like the 10th time. So they let me go. And so that was a real bummer. And it was right around that time. Well, it was actually before that my dad committed suicide. I had mentioned that before. And it was really fucked up. I mean, he was a drinker and he was a gambler, but he had it very much in control until like the last couple years of his life. His relationship with my mom had totally deteriorated, and his purpose of providing for a wife and kids was no longer a thing. And I think because he no longer had that purpose, he didn't have the same meaning that he had, and it fucked with him. And also the market crashing was not helpful whatsoever. And and he shot himself. And when that happened in 2015, I chose to use that as a reason to get high, because when I had gotten on methadone shortly after I moved to New York, I stayed off heroin for about a year and a half until my dad, and I was still prescribed Vyvanse and Xanax. I was still doing that, and methadone, but I went home for the funeral, did the eulogy. I was able to show up and be present. Sort of present. But But when I got back into town, I had this incredible experience where I'm at the door of my building in Hell's Kitchen on 52nd and Ninth, and sitting outside my building with a sign is this kid blatantly nodding out with a sign that says HIV positive, please help. And I'm pretty sure that the sign was bullshit. I never actually asked the kid, even though I got to know him a little bit. And in that moment, I had the decision of, okay, I could go up to my apartment and fucking avoid a bunch of misery that's coming, and potential death, or I can go, I can offer to buy this kid a bag and find out where to cop. And, naturally I chose to buy him a bag and go cop. Turns out there was a very connected Puerto Rican drug dealer who had the best cocaine that I've ever done and excellent heroin. 1 avenue and 2 blocks up. So about a 7-minute walk. So I could, when I was from my apartment, I could take Dolly, our dog, for a walk, and I would have time to go and cop, and it wouldn't be suspicious. It was like perfect. It was like God set it up for me that way, which sounds sick. And I don't think that he did, because I don't think that my God wants me to be destructive, but it was almost like I manifested it, like I manifested the fucking car crash. Like I really believe that what we think and what we put energy into manifests, and drugs had been on my mind. And so whatever. So after my dad died, things went downhill pretty quickly. I lost the job at Nobu. Ashley kicked me out like 100 times. She finally kicked me out for good. And I was happy about it for a minute, because I was like, okay, I'm finally free. I somehow got this through her. Actually, before we broke up, I got this good job doing sales. So I was working at this other restaurant. I was making good money. I was working a ton. I was like staying out of trouble. I was still doing heroin and coke, speedballs regularly, but I was like somehow managing it somewhat. Lived in Brooklyn for a year, and then had this period of redemption where I was like keeping my shit together enough to where things were looking up, where I was living with Gary again. I know that sounds crazy, but we had like rekindled, and I was living with him again, and I had gotten my job back at Nobu. And one of my coworkers who had been a server with me was now the GM, and we had reconnected, and I was like, would you ever hire me back? And he's like, I would only hire you back if you agreed with the agreement that you would plan on being a manager, which I was like stunned by, because he saw the potential in me. And I was like, all right, fuck yeah, let's do it. And so I started at Nobu again, and things with Ashley were going better. My ex, who had been with for 4 years and who like I was obsessed with, but had broken up with me, we were talking again and hanging out. So fucking one fateful, weekend, Gary had been in the hospital for some physical issue, and he brought home with him 90 Dilaudid and 90 Klonopin. I went to work and came home, and I found him dead on the ground. He had overdosed in his apartment. And there were still lines on the island, like cut up, that he had been snorting. Naturally, I took the drugs because I didn't want the police to have them. I wanted to keep them safe. And of course, I'm up all night with the police, and I do a fat shot of Dilaudid the next morning before I have to go back to work at Nobu on like 2 hours of sleep. And I think I had taken a Klonopin like an idiot. And so I'm at work, and I was like doing okay for a while, and then towards the end of the shift, I start nodding out. and they notice and they send me home. On my way out of work, I walk past one of my coworkers named Tim, who was a recovering meth addict, and we were tight. Like, he had watched our dog before, and he was hip to what was going on because he could see how fucked up I was. That night, his apartment was broken into, and I have no recollection of what happened after work that night because I like got more fucked up. And it's possible that I broke into his apartment. Like, that is a possibility. I don't think it happened. But it's possible. And I do have this image of like being in his apartment in the dark, but that could be like made up in my head from just thinking that and him saying that. It really could, because I don't know how I would have gotten into his apartment. Like, it was up on the third floor and he said he locked his door and blah, 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 blah. So at Nobu, my reputation was tarnished. So that job was gone. That weekend, Ashley had asked me to watch Dolly, our dog. I watched Dolly, but I'm getting high the whole weekend. And I leave a spoon of meth residue in the bathroom while I'm out. And I had pawned her personal computer. She had a work computer and a personal computer, but I pawned it just for the day, and I was going to get it back the next day because I was getting my check. She came back a day early. She comes home, notices the meth residue spoon, and notices her computer gone. And that's it. You know, obviously, like, any chance of us rekindling all the you know, the good vibes that I had rebuilt were gone. So like, in one weekend, I had lost my job, lost any possibility of getting back with Ashley, and lost like a really great friend, and lost my place to live because I was living at Gary's. And it turns out that he owed he owed 2 months of back rent. And so in order to stay where he lived, I was going to have to pay that. So I was totally fucked. That was like a real bottom. So that was 2008. That was 2017, the fall. I moved back to Michigan. I don't want to be in Michigan. I'm not doing well. I end up going to treatment like 3 times in the span of like, you know, a year and a half. And things are just getting worse and worse and worse. I have periods of good times. And then I get to March of 2020, and somehow I had gotten and a couple of months before that, I had finally gotten off of methadone, like 2 months before that, by doing heroin. That's how I got off methadone, because I tried before and wasn't able to, because it was just, you were just sick. I was just sick forever. And so by March 2020, I had somehow gotten this job with Fiat Chrysler. Actually, it was through somebody in AA, and was making good money. And so I had access to a lot of drugs. And finally, everyone was leaving me alone because everyone had pretty much given up on me. And so I had the situation that I'd always wanted, where I had all the drugs and people were leaving me alone, and was more miserable than I'd ever been. And got this abscess. And that's when I sent a photo to Dave. And by the way, back in 2016 is when I met Dave. I left that out, and was on Dopey, and we stayed in touch, and we had a meeting together, and we hung out one other time. But yeah, so, and we just kept in touch. So, and I kept in touch with Chris up until his death too, actually. And I knew Chris before Dave, from our friend Ted. So I reached out to Dave with a photo. It's like reaching out for help. And he asked me, "Are you willing to go to treatment?" And I had to think about it, because at that time I had a shitty 1-room apartment in a basement where, you know, I was able to just do whatever the fuck I wanted, but I had no veins left. Like, I wasn't able to get high the way that I wanted to. Shooting in my neck, and it was gruesome and it was ugly, and it was terrible. I didn't want to do it anymore, and I was sick of having a shit life. So I said yes, and the line, if you're fucked and willing to go to Southern California, was coming to mind, and I was like, that would be so amazing. And he gets back to me and he's like, yeah, you're gonna speak to Aloe. And so I spoke to them, and it was a fucking mess getting out here, but I got out here and went through, was there for 6 months, fucking got into kratom for like a minute, which is dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it. And then have been straight since then, and do AA, and fucking life is good. Well, it was super long, guys. Thanks for hanging in there. And
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder, would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. Yeah, I wanna be good so bad. But bad desire is all I've ever had. And I wanna take a ride up in the sky and watch all of the aeroplanes just pass me by. And I wanna see a Learjet liner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. Yeah, I wanna be good so bad. But bad desire is all I've ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's high noon where I stand. Oh, my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. But it's high noon where I stand. And I wonder, would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind? I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. But I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. But bad desire is all I've ever had. And these suckers make and it's all I've ever had. And I wanna call my dad, and it's all I've ever